In this video we want to talk about scientific management. Now there are several videos on this topic on the course, and this just presents a slightly different version, but it's an important topic and one with which you should be familiar. This view of the organization was developed in America in the early 20th century. It was developed by Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, by Henry Galton, and crucially Frederick Taylor. I say crucially Frederick Taylor because when we think of scientific management we normally associate it with Frederick Taylor. In fact, scientific management is sometimes called Taylorism. So we'll be focusing on the ideas of Taylor in this video. Taylor published his book, The Principles of Scientific Management, in 1911. This work grew out of his frustration with management practices at the time. In 1911, industry was just developing. Modern ideas about management and the ways in which work could be organized and the structure of organizations could be set up to optimize the output and minimize costs and so on. These were all under discussion and were also in a process of development. So ideas were being bandied around at the time about how to best organize work. So his early work, 1911, as I said, was seminal, obviously it being the first, but it was also associated with the way forward, the scientific way forward. People in 1911 looked to science to be the answer to just about everything, and scientific management was therefore a catchy title, one that industrialists would latch on to and consider, since it was scientific, then this was the way in which business should be organized and structured. He considered that workers lacked incentive, and to be more productive, in fact, workers feared working themselves out of a job. So he saw workers as they were almost part of the machinery. They were not thinking individuals. They lacked incentives. They didn't want to overwork. And they felt if they did overproduce, they would somehow work themselves out of a job. There would be no more work left for them to do if they worked so hard. So something needed to be done to address motivation. Something needed to be done to get the workers to apply themselves more effectively, to become more productive, and not to fear the idea of working themselves out of a job, but they needed some rules, some basis upon which they could base their working lives. And of course, an appeal to science was very attractive, particularly for the employers, because it meant that they were going about their work properly. There was a big trust in science at the time, as I said. So Taylor emphasized the following points in his book. He considered that there should be greater division of labour, with tasks being clearly defined. So a greater division of labour means breaking down the job into very small tasks, and each worker being given the task. So it was quite dehumanizing. The workers were not they didn't have a lot of enjoyment out of their work. The job was not very enriched. There wasn't a great variation in the work, or nothing to engage humans, nothing to give them pleasure out of the work or vary the work. In fact, far from it. He believed that the tasks should be very small, very repetitive, and clearly defined and measurable as well. Decisions should be based on logic rather than on emotion or guesswork. So the management should, as far as possible, try to calculate what needed to be done rather than guessing what needed to be done. So stopwatches were very important to make sure that the tasks could be measured. How long did it take to complete this task, and was the worker applying him or herself effectively during the timing period? Then that could become a benchmark. So then the management could calculate how many of the items could be produced in an hour or in a day. So it was based on logic and calculation rather than on emotion. And there should be full managerial control over the workshop. There shouldn't be workers in the workshop who have little empires, who have their particular tasks that they can do well, and they have their own set of machinery or their own set of tools, and they were seen as somehow elite within the workplace. That shouldn't happen. The workers should be subservient to the management, and the management should have full control of the workshop. Where possible, work should be measured and targets set. As I said, stopwatches were very important in this framework. Management could measure how long a particular task took to complete, and they could measure it several times and take an average, so they knew how long a task would take, and therefore they were able to work out how long particular jobs would take going through. So everything was calculated, and the workers would have to respond to those timings. The workers would be expected to work according to what was calculated. So the idea was to standardize the work, standardize efficiency, because the management knew how long the workers would take to complete tasks, so efficiency was standardized, and there was discipline. Everyone knew exactly what they had to do. So it was a very strict place of work. Each worker knew his or her tasks, they knew how long the task would take, and they had to meet that requirement. Techniques such as time and motion study should be adopted. Time and motion studies means that the management would send in specialist workers with stopwatches and charts and so on, and they would make observations of the workers about how the workers went about doing their job and how the machines were laid out or how the tools were laid out to complete the task, and then how long the worker took to complete the task and which tools were used and how long the tools were used for. So it was itemizing every part of the task, and based on a scrutiny of the results, it was possible to work out what was most efficient. How should the tools be laid out? Where should the workers stand? Where should the materials come and be delivered? And how should the work be passed on to the next section? And everything should be itemized, written down, calculated. Management should take responsibility for training the workers, and the workers should be paid on piece rates, paid on the number of tasks performed, in other words, and enjoy shorter working hours. He recognized that workers were not machines. They could work intensively for some period of time, but then they would need to rest. They would need to, in a sense, recharge their batteries. They would need to recover from the intense work. So management should take responsibility for training the workers. The workers should be adequately trained. Their skills should have been developed before they were put in the position of making the product or performing the task. And they should be paid piece rates. They should be paid for the amount they produce, which will give them the incentive to produce a lot. Taylor may be criticized for his limited view of human nature. Well, he saw the human being in the workplace as similar to a machine. The workers were, in a sense, machines. They would perform the tasks. They knew how long they were allocated the task, and they would have to work within that requirement. They would have to perform the task in a certain way. And they were trained to do this, but they were, in a sense, no different to the machines. In fact, it could be suggested that the humans were only involved because machines could not be developed to do the tasks. The human body is very flexible. We're able to reach out and pick up objects and rotate the objects and drill holes, and we're able to do a lot of things with our body. With using tools in conjunction with our body, we're able to be very productive and very skillful. And to get machines to do that would be very costly. In fact, even if it was possible in the first place. Even in the 21st century, as we're in now, robotics is still suffering from this problem of dexterity. They can't get robots to be completely similar to humans. They're making progress, but robots are still clumsy machines. Whereas the human is a very flexible, if in a sense, machine. We are flexible machines. We are able to do things with high degrees of skill. So it was necessary to have humans in the workplace. But the humans in the workplace, according to this view of scientific management, they should be controlled, they should be set to perform particular tasks and nothing else. Just perform the tasks. The tasks in terms of timings should be measured and their efficiency could therefore be guaranteed. So it's not a very nice way of looking at humans in the workplace, because it's dehumanizing. They were there because they were the best solution, and there was no such thing as looking at their emotions, their wider emotions, or their feelings, or their requirements. It was getting the task done according to the schedule. He saw remuneration as the main driving force of the worker. He believed that scientific management was to the benefit of both the worker and manager. So he believed that people went to work for money, for salary and for remuneration only. We now think of people going to work because a sense of worth, a sense of community, a sense of achievement. All of these things are associated with people going to work. People want to have a nice working environment. It's a social institution. They're able to see their work friends. So we have a different view nowadays to back in 1911. But Taylor considered that workers go to work for salary alone, for remuneration alone. Frank Gilbreth, introduced the motion method study as a tool for measuring efficiency within the workplace. He studied bricklayers and managed to reduce their tasks from 18 to 5 without decreasing effort. This resulted in a doubling of their productivity. So Gilbreth was looking at the jobs that were allocated and trying to work out what's the most efficient way of doing the job. Where should the tools be laid out? What design of workplace would work best, would lead to most efficiency? So he was looking at the tasks that were being performed and trying to work out how the tasks should be configured, best configured to achieve efficiency. Of course, the workers would have to be trained to complete the tasks. The tasks would be repetitive and there would be small tasks. but there was still an opportunity for the business to make sure that the workbench or the area where the work took place was properly designed so as to maximize efficiency. Lillian Gilbreth continued his work. She was his wife, continued his work after he died. She concluded that dissatisfaction with work was not caused by monotony, but by management lack of interest in the workers. So her view was that workers were more motivated when they saw management being interested in what they were doing. When management showed an interest in their working lives and their tasks, that led to greater motivation. Another writer in the area was Henry Gant. He's famous, of course, for his graphical method for planning and scheduling, the Gantt chart. Gant did not believe in a single method. Instead, he looked at what was best in a given situation. So Gant was more flexible in his thinking about work and the design of work and the layout of work, but was still within the view that the scientific approach was probably most appropriate and the only way in which work would be done. So in this short session, what we've done is we've looked a little more detail at Taylor, Frederick Taylor, and his views. And what we've discovered is that Taylor saw workers as similar to machines. They should be set to do repetitive tasks. The tasks should be small scale, so the workers would achieve a high level of skill in doing the work. The work could be measured, and the workplace should be set out appropriately to optimize efficiency. There was no real mention of other motivations. People at the time believed that people went to work, that workers went to work for remuneration only. So there was no need to have a particularly nice working environment, or there was no need to take into account, in a sense, the feelings of the workers. The workers were there, they were going to be paid, they would produce as many of the items as possible, and what's more, the management knew how many items should be produced in a given session, and the workers would be paid for the amount of work that they did. There are still remnants of this way of thinking in some parts of industry and in some countries, but by and large, we think now of workers going to work for a whole range of reasons. Remuneration is one of them, and sometimes at work we do face repetitive tasks, but more and more we're starting to see workers as going to work because they have a social requirement. They need to go to work to mix with others and to have social interaction. They also may go to work out of a sense of achievement. They want to achieve something. They want promotion, or they want to be recognized in some way. So we have a much more complex view of workers nowadays. Back in 1911, when Taylor wrote his book, mere mention of the word science meant to most people that that was the right way. The scientific way was seen as the best. It was scientific. But it took away a lot of humanity from the workers. The workers were almost like machines, as I said earlier. They were there because the machines could not do the tasks. And presumably if the machines could do it, if advanced robotics existed back then perhaps we would not have had people working in industry making very small items, performing very small tasks, but performing a lot of them. So it's an interesting view, and it's one that contrasts with what we think about in terms of motivation nowadays. But that's all we're going to deal with in this session, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.